Good morning, everybody. Sorry I can't hear you. Good morning. How are you enjoying TechEd? Yeah? Okay. What an attractive-looking bunch of people. Yes. Okay. Well, a very good morning to you. Welcome to my session, The Dark Web Rises, a journey through the looking glass. My name is Andy Malone. I'm from Scotland, or as some of you might know it, as north of the wall. So I'm an MVP in enterprise security, very much like Marcus Murray and Hussein and Paula. I deal with more, well, a different side of security than they do. Based in the UK, but I pretty much travel everywhere. I'm also the founder of the Cybercrime Security Forum, of which, if you're in the Netherlands, we have an event next week, and the week after we have one in Cyprus. Go to the banner at the bottom of the slide for more details on that. Both myself and Paula are going to be there for that. So, this particular session is all about the dark side of the internet. So, how on earth do we see the dark side of the internet? Well, really, we're going to focus on kind of technologies that are supposed to keep you anonymous online. So it's probably absolutely nothing to do with TechEd, nothing to do with Windows. This is a little diversion. This is security, and I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think it's very, very relevant at the moment in light of the Snowden disclosures. Now, last year, if you would have been at one of my sessions last year, I kind of dedicated about 5 minutes onto this, and a lot of people came back to me and said, "Hey, that was interesting." So I've kind of fleshed the whole thing out here. So we're going to talk about what is TOR and what does it mean to be anonymous, and can you truly be anonymous on the internet? Truly, the answer is no. There is no such thing as really being anonymous on the internet. If anybody, if they want you, they will get you some way and somehow. That's the key thing to know. But there are things that you can do to kind of make yourself a little bit more anonymous, should we say. So we're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about who uses TOR and why. So is it just bad guys? Of course not. Okay, and there are a number of legitimate reasons to use this particular technology. So we're going to talk about the technology itself, who uses it, why, and hopefully by the end of the session I'm going to kind of give a rounded, so I'm not necessarily for this technology, I'm not necessarily against this technology, I just want you to make your own mind up about it. So we're going to talk about, understand what the dark web actually is. Essentially, it's anything that Bing or Google don't classify, basically. So if your page is not in Google or Bing, you're on the dark web, pretty much. We'll also talk about learning about potential flaws in the technology. And are there flaws in the technology? And if so, how do we exploit them? How do law enforcement agencies exploit them? You as a business, for example, you might work for a school, a college, a business. You may not want your users actually using TOR on your network. So is there a way to block this technology? We'll also talk about that. We're also going to talk about potential forensics and law enforcement implications of using this technology as well. So that's pretty much the areas that we're going to talk about. Also, TOR technology or anonymous technology and your business as well. So we're going to talk about the concept of proxies. Now, this technology has been out for a few years. It's evolved over a number of years as well, because obviously threats evolve. So again, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. So first of all, what is TOR and why do we have it? Really, to talk about TOR, we need to look at it from kind of two perspectives. So on one side, the whole point of this open source software, and that's important to say that, it is completely open source, it's run by a voluntary organization, it's not absolutely non-profit, it makes no money whatsoever. That's the first thing. So the idea is to give the oppressed a voice. So there are places in the world, recently you probably read about Turkey disabling certain areas of the internet, certain websites. In the UK, for example, obviously the movie industry, the music industry, they don't want us going online downloading movies and music. Not that I ever do that, you understand. Obviously, in the good side, it will give the oppressed a potential voice, which is great. However, on the other side, what we've seen over the last few years is obviously a huge rise in criminal activity. So from really nasty adult websites, child pornography, human trafficking, slavery, gambling, illicit drugs, ammo and weapons and so on. We've seen this freely available on the internet, on this particular side of the internet. So it's really important that if you decide to go down the dark side, a Sith you will become. Yes. So it's much better to be a Jedi. Okay, so basically finding a voice for the oppressed. So we've seen this throughout the world recently. I was in Ukraine recently. I was in Kiev, a beautiful city. And they're having one or two problems over there at the moment, as you probably appreciate. Likewise, folks in Afghanistan, folks in Iraq, so countries where the internet is oppressed. So a number of Middle Eastern countries, for example, a number of Asian countries kind of curtail what you can and what you can't look at. So we feel that this particular website is not suitable for you. Yes. So, of course, it's all about freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom to look at stuff. So, again, it's very important, this piece of technology out there. Another thing as well is also if you're a reporter in one of these countries. So, for example, in Iran, let's say, you can't have the BBC are not allowed to go into Iran to actually report the news. So, again, this is a great way to actually get the news out of a country. So, again, finding a voice for the oppressed. So, why use the onion? What is this onion anyway? So, basically, freedom from potential oppression, from having communications monitored. So, here in the US and other parts of the world, certainly since the Snowden revelations, of course, it's not a case of they're capturing my data as it gets to you. They're actually capturing my data at the source. So they're actually tapping the actual cables of the data. So, and how do you on earth defend against things like that? Well, you can make it harder for people. You can use encryption technologies. So it's actually quite interesting that, we talk about AES and TLS encryption, all these different types of encryptions, and they're all NSA compliant. Okay, okay, so they've got the keys. Is that basically what you're trying to tell me, Andy? Pretty much, probably. So it's always a good idea to go with kind of open source technologies in that kind of respect. Also, as you can see, it's useful in the UK, for example, certain Swedish websites are blocked, for example. So if you want to access content illegally, then obviously that. But also other things as well. So, for example, I'm in the UK. We have the BBC iPlayer. You know, I'm traveling. I'm abroad here. I want to watch the iPlayer. I want to watch on-demand TV. So again, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can either use something like a TOR, and you can also use, some kind of proxy. So there are kind of genuine reasons to kind of use this technology, so not necessarily criminal reasons. So when we talk about the TOR program, the Onion Router, by the way, that's TOR, obviously it's not just one particular piece of software. So if you go to the torproject.org website, you'll actually see that there are a number of different projects. This is probably, in my opinion, as an IT pro, probably the most important, because it's got not necessarily just a Linux distro, it really doesn't matter what kind of distro that it's using, but the fact that it will boot up with nothing else. So it's just a pure connection to the TOR network. So there's nothing else running in the background. Whereas if I just run Tor on my normal laptop here, I mean, what are you going to have open? The chances are you're going to have things like Skype, you're going to have LinkedIn, you're going to have, Microsoft Link. You're going to have lots of different things running in the background. So am I truly anonymous? Not really in that case. So this is kind of a pure method to be anonymous. Another one is the Tor browser, which is probably the most famous one, and it's the one I'll show you today. Can I just have a show of hands? Who uses Tor? Who's aware of Tor? Who uses it? Let's see just a little raise of, wow, not many of you. That's interesting. That's interesting. You must all feel that freedom is great here in the US then. Okay. Yeah. But I've got a little mic here, and I heard the guy at the back. He says, no, but I'm going to use it. Okay. So another technology is the Atlas program as well. So within the TOR program, there's a little application called Vadilla, and you can basically see a list of all the routers or the onion routers throughout the world, certainly the exit nodes and things like that, which is quite interesting. So, for example, if I was wanting to actually force my web browser to actually use an onion router in the UK, so, for example, that I can watch BBC iPlayer, that would be quite a useful thing to use. But it also shows you approximately where they are as well, and it gives you a little bit more information on those. The other one is STEM. This is a development environment. So I said, hey, this is open source technology. It's for you. You can go in here, you can develop, you can do whatever you want with it. And very, very powerful set of tools, and it's a very powerful environment for this technology. I did mention as well that the TOR project is completely open source, and most of it's run by volunteers, and anybody can volunteer, by the way. So if you're a developer, you can volunteer. If you want to go out and evangelize about it, then you can go and do that. Another one, of course, is obviously it's not just about the Windows platform or the Apple platform. More and more now it's about mobile devices as well. So again, as a news reporter, if I was in a country where my communications are restricted, the fact that I've got a smartphone would be quite useful. So at the moment, the Orbit platform is really for Android, but I can tell you that there are currently developments in the works for things like Apple and Microsoft versions of this. Well, actually, there's a question. A lot of people say, okay, Andy, why are there not versions for Apple and Microsoft? And you've got to think, why? Is there a reason? Are they trying to oppress it? So, again, I'll let you draw your own conclusions with that. Another one is the ARM shell. So this is a shell version of this. And again, you can see this actually in the Tails platform. And also, we have a number of pluggable transports that you can feed in to the Tor browser as well. Probably the newest member of the Tor family is the Tor Cloud. So if you want a complete to be anonymous, you can connect through the Tor Cloud. And again, for more details on that, you can actually go to the website on that. So, Andy, you talk about Tor, is it the only option out there? No, absolutely not. So there are a number of variants out there, as you can see. The thing about the variants is typically they're all pretty much based on this technology anyway. So I'm not picking on one particular technology for a reason. It's just that this is the one that I've been working with. But they're all very, very similar kind of technologies. Okay, so where did it all begin? Well, not that long ago, actually. It's an open source project. Currently, the guys are based out the YMCA in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So you see they've got huge budgets. At the moment, there's 33 full-time employees. And the rest, obviously, how they get their money is through voluntary contributions worldwide. Initially sponsored by the Office of Naval Research. That didn't last too long, as you can appreciate, when they said, okay, can we get the keys now, please? And the TOR project said, no, you can't have the keys. And then they said, no, 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 you have a responsibility to give us the keys. Because, we're the upstanding government and you've got to, we want to protect the citizens. No, we don't need to give you the keys because this is an open source, non-profit program. So there are no back doors in TOR. That's the key thing. So you can see the code. You can see that there are no back doors in the technology. And I would actually have to say right now, TOR technology works. It's really good. It works. It does have flaws, but it's around the sides, the other stuff that goes along with it. Okay. So this is Jacob here, and last year he did a presentation, and that was his quote. So when asked, okay, how are you funded? Surely the NSA's got a back door to you. Well, if they do, he basically said openly, no, we don't do that. It's not the way we operate. Now, whether they tie him down and beat him up with a big stick, that's another story. I don't know. So, electricity can do wonders for people. That's pretty mean, isn't it? Okay, so just to give you an idea of the kind of numbers that we're talking about, between 60 and 80,000 users per day, and it's growing. Okay, we're talking about 3,500 exit routers worldwide and growing. We're talking about it's actually about 5.5 to 6 million users worldwide who are now using this technology. So every page, it's important that you understand this. So when we talk about the dark web, I'm not just talking about the criminal, the illicit activity. I'm talking about every page that your friendly search engine doesn't see. Okay? So obviously we're talking about government content as well, military content. You don't want that indexed in search engines. Okay? So again, there are legitimate reasons to stay dark, and that's important to understand that. So 90-something% of pages on the internet are in the dark web. That's a very important thing you need to understand. So what we actually access through the internet today is actually a very small content, a very small amount of the actual whole content. So the dark web is enormous, by the way. So the media say that the only way to access the dark web is through TOR. Absolute rubbish. So obviously finding content is very difficult if search engines don't find it. But that's one of the reasons why the TOR network is out there. There are a number of what we call wikis out there to help you find content. Also, the question I have to ask you, is it all bad? And I say, no, it's not all bad. Again, as I said at the beginning, it really is a tale of two sides. So who uses the technology? Well, you and me. People at home, we use the technology. You might be traveling, you want access to something, you want to be, you maybe want to make sure that you're anonymous, you're sending a little bit of anonymous email. We have a right to privacy. It's written into your constitution. Yes, we have a right to privacy. And one of the videos that I showed at the beginning, just before my session started, was all about the history of technology. So that was within 80 to 100 years that's happened. So if you think about the Old West, and, the Wild West, as you know it, lasted about 26 years. But on the movies, it made it sound like it lasted 100 years. But it didn't. It was a very, very short space of time. And the same thing can be said about today. The same thing can be said about technology. Look how quickly we've advanced in 30 years. Hell, Facebook, 1 billion users in 10 years. That's unsurpassed in human history. The amount of data that we store. I was recently in the Microsoft data center in Dublin. Absolutely ginormous. In fact, did you know that Microsoft are changing their name to Skynet? Okay. Okay. So, home users. Obviously activists as well. So I'm not going to go into activism and hacktivism. I spoke about that last year. So activists, they want to be anonymous. They want a voice out there. Whistleblowers. So it's really nice. WikiLeaks, you know, was he a traitor or was he a good guy? You know, I don't know. I'm not sure which side of the fence I'm on. But the fact is sometimes we need whistleblowers. Yes, we need to give the government, we need to give the law enforcement agencies, just hold on a minute, yes, hang on a minute, yes, you're doing that, but is it the right thing that you're doing? So sometimes whistleblowers are a good thing. And then, of course, you've got journalists. So I mentioned journalists who work today in very perilous conditions. Some of these people are incredibly brave, and they work in very dangerous situations. So I'm talking Ukraine, I'm talking Afghanistan, you know? I'm talking Liverpool. No. And of course, then you've got the military. So you've got military and law enforcement agencies, and they use the TOR network. It's a big tool in the battle against crime. Yes? And, you know, you might, I mean, look at things like, you know, drug sites and so on that have been brought down. Okay, so what about the technology itself then? How does the technology actually work? So what is this concept of an onion router? So the onion router is it's a very, very slick, clever piece of technology. And it's an anonymous, I really have trouble saying that word, communications technique. Okay, and the messages are constantly encrypted. And it uses a combination of DNS and digital certificates. So every layer basically has a different digital certificate, has a different layer of encryption, has a different DNS address. So basically one layer doesn't know about the previous layer. That's the beautiful thing about this technology. So it's very difficult to trace your way back with this. So each onion router, essentially, as it goes through, as it transverses through the network, removes a layer of itself and then proceeds to the next node. So eventually, the encryption, the SSL technology is removed, and what's left is the actual data. So this analogy of removing layers, this is one of the reasons why we call it an onion router. So that, as I said in the slide earlier, there are variants that you can use, things like garlic routing and so on, but it's essentially all the same thing. This is quite a good diagram of it. You can see, so we've seen each wrapper, each layer of the onion only knows where it's essentially going and where it's come from. It doesn't know the origin of the data. And that's the very, very clever thing about this technology. So it's also been a real headache for law enforcement agencies as well, you know, tracing the data. So what we have here then is we have the internet here, and you can see initially we have 3 ports open here. So you tend to find that when you start the TOR network up, or the onion router on your machine, it fires up port 9001, and then we'll choose let's say a random port. So I've said 9030 here, before it kicks into port 443. So each layer maintains transport layer, TLS, AES encryption. So each layer is fully encrypted, and of course you're going to need a digital certificate for that. You're going to need a DNS record for that. So they use essentially they use the onion router to establish what we classify as a circuit onto the network. So each circuit, each connection basically lasts for only about 10 minutes. So again, it's torn down and reestablishes itself. Again, it's great, great security. It uses TLS certificates, and again, I'll show you some of these in a moment. So you probably say, oh, hang on a minute, that's just the certificates, though, for this session. So it's constantly updating those certificates. Again, it's great security. So this is how it works. We've got Alice here at the top. She fires up her Onion router, her Tor browser, whatever you want to call it, and essentially she will look for a list of clients. So who am I going to connect to? I need a relay. So is the actual node that you're trying to connect to, is it a relay node or is it an exit node? So obviously she's looking for a list of relays, so she speaks to Dave. Dave supplies the list, and then essentially she establishes a random route across the internet. So again, you see this is all in SSL, it's all absolutely encrypted, and eventually she makes contact with Bob on the other end here. And you can see Bob, you can obviously have an SSL connection there. More often than not, it tends to be just a HTTP connection. So the clever thing, though, is if she disconnects or says, you know, I've been on for 5 minutes, I want to create a new identity, it instantly rips that away and creates a completely alternate route. So this is again, you can set really nice scripts to do this automatically. So it's a little bit like, you know, walking around with a pay-as-you-go phone. You know, you just throw it out, take out the next one, take out the next one, and so on. It's that kind of analogy that we're talking about. So every time you hit the new identity button or you close it down and reestablish a connection, it will essentially create a random route every single time. And that's what makes this really clever, really smart technology. The mathematics of it, oh, by the way, I'm going to post these slides. I've put loads of extra links, loads of extra content. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you sign up to my Twitter account @AndyMalone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a SkyDrive. I'm going to put all the videos. I've got loads of white papers. If you work for law enforcement agencies, I've got some really nice documentation that you will find quite useful as well. So, you know, hunting the bad guy, for example. So I'll make those available to you. So this is kind of a good kind of overview of, you see how much traffic and how the traffic passes back and forth. And probably looking at that, you're looking at that going, there seems to be an awful lot of toing and froing there. That's one of the downsides of using the TOR network. You do find that the browsing is a little bit slower. Okay, so it's much slower than the regular internet, which potentially could be an Achilles heel in it. But again, in a scenario where you're being oppressed and you have to get your message out, something is better than nothing. So we're talking about onion routing cells. So I mentioned these cells, these packets of data that go across the web. These essentially come in a number of flavors. So at the top there, we have what we call control cells. So they basically interpret the messages, interpret the code, where am I going to? Then we have relay cells. So these are the cells that actually carry the end-to-end data across the nodes. And essentially, these are comprised of a number of things. So we have a streaming ID or a circuit identifier here. We have an identity checksum and also a set of payload commands. So where is this actually going and what is the cell doing? And then finally, we have the actual content, the data itself. And all this is wrapped up in this little cell. So when we talk about the different commands, by the way, this is the current list of onion router cell commands. So if you were going to develop your own scripts, if you were going to develop your own kind of TOR environment, which I said you can do that because there are tools to do that, then these are some of the commands that you will see. So one of those, well, in fact, looking at those, you can see the relay teardown to close a broken stream. Now, that's a very important command because, obviously, if there is a broken stream, you don't want to leave that open because that could be a potential vulnerability. Likewise, the relay send me or congestion control is another very useful command, because that can help defend against things like denial of service attacks. So, of course, this type of technology, like all web-based technology, is potentially vulnerable to denial of service attacks. But things like that, congestion control, you can actually break that and stop that. And it works quite well. Okay, so actually using the Onion router itself, as I mentioned, you can go to the TOR project. I'll give you a demo in a second. You can download the set of tools. The actual Onion router requires a client. There are a number of clients that you can get. I'm just using one just for the purpose of the demo. I'm sure you guys will go off and you'll find other ones. You can even create your own. Many of the sites on the TOR network require pre-registration. One word about that. Obviously, if you're a bad guy, then this is heaven for you. But if you're going to pre-register for a site, please don't use your real email. You want to have an anonymous email, anonymous content there. Make sure, so anonymous email address, as I've mentioned. So on the TOR network, every address is randomly generated. So basically, it's randomly generated and it's rebuilt and it's refreshed quite often, actually. So you can see that every URL will have at the end of it a .onion address. That's the first thing. So that, if you try to browse a .onion address in regular Bing or regular Google, you would probably just get an error message. It wouldn't go anywhere. So you actually need some kind of client. You need a client to use this. So the addresses themselves are basically 16-character addresses. They can be alphanumeric. They can contain hashes. And they're all based on a public key. So a public key certificate, which is when you configure the actual service. So this is generated when you actually create the service. These 16 or so character hashes can be made up in any letter of the alphabet, and again, they do support multilingual things as well. So you can see basically what we have here. It represents an 80-bit number in base 32 when it's created. So when we talk about the just go here. So, yeah, I'm just going here to the, this is the website here, the torproject.org, and you can go ahead, you can download the TOR project, and you can see details on the other projects there as well. Again, I really like Tails, so it will create a kind of a USB bootable version. So if you want to, it's a little bit like Windows to go, I guess, that type of concept. Okay, so that's the TOR project. There are others as well, so not just the TOR project. So there are a number of variants out there as well. And again, I'll make sure that you guys have got all of these links to the browsers that I've got. So I'm going to close down my web browser at the moment, and I'm actually going, so assuming that I've gone ahead, I've downloaded the TOR network, I'm going to go and actually open this up. And you can now see, it gives me a message, and this is in full HTTPS. So what's actually happening when I open up this browser? Let me just maximize that. I'm just going to come down here, and if we actually go in, this is the actual the stuff that comes down. So when you extract the TOR network, this is basically what you get. So what we have is, if I go into TOR here, you've got a series of DLLs. If I go into you've got some documentation that which is quite useful. If I go into the data and into the TOR area here, let me just zoom into this. Finished already. Okay, so what we see here is you see a number of files. So the first one at the top here is the cached certificate. So if I just open this up with Notepad, I mentioned these SSL certificates here, and you can see that these are all here. Now, these are not permanent. These are constantly kind of ripped down and refreshed. And this is what makes it very, very difficult to track the fact that these certificates are torn down and rebuilt on a regular basis here. One of the key files that we've got here, this is the torque file. Again, if I open this up with Notepad, you can see that by the default here, this is the default settings. This just means, hey, I just want to just find me the closest node. Just find me the closest relay node. Now, what you could do is you could edit this file, for example. A useful tool is if I actually go on Vadilla, if I open up this, and this is the control panel for TOR. They used to be bundled together, but now for some reason, with this particular version, they're separate. You can actually go ahead now and view the TOR network. So this is the actual TOR network. These are the various relay nodes here. Let me just zoom in so you can see. And you can see these are pretty much all over the world, okay? So what you're looking for, potentially, I mentioned that BBC iPlayer thing. If I wanted to locate the UK, for example, I would just look for a UK flag. And every node is actually identified. Let's see, there we go. Default, that's not a very good one. But anyway, so if I go into default here, you can copy the nickname into the text file, and basically what that will then do is it will then force TOR to use an exit node in that country. Now, obviously, there are going to be risks to doing that. You could potentially get caught, but again, it's again another way to essentially proxy addresses across the web. So again, you get the details. You can, it says you can zoom into the relay. It doesn't really give you very much detail, this. So that's the, again, Vadilla, the framework there. That's quite useful. Now, the other thing that you can also do with this particular onion router is you can actually set up relaying. So by default, if you install it by default, you're just a client. But if you want to get more actively involved and say, yeah, okay, I'm willing to pass traffic through my network, yeah, you can pretty much go ahead and you can say, I want to set up a relay, a TOR relay. For details on that, again, I'm going to put a full set of instructions on my OneDrive. If I refer to it as SkyDrive, sorry, I'm still in SkyDrive mode. Yeah. Okay. So again, very, very important set of files here. So the GeoIP, obviously the geographical information of each of the exit nodes is stored here. And the key thing to note about some of these files here, as I said, is they're temporary files. They are refreshed on a regular basis here. Okay, so the next thing, if I just go back here. So you can see here what I've done is I've actually, on each of my slides, I've put a whole bunch of web links, which gives you a little bit more detail on that. So we've spoken about why we use this type of technology. We've spoken about how to configure this technology. Actually, just one other little thing. I just realized there was one other little point that I wanted to mention. Just before, if somebody asks me, Andy, is that the only onion router control that you have? No, of course not. There's this other one. This is the advanced onion router. So this is, again, a free one that you can download. This is a very, very detailed onion router. And again, you can do things like bypass ISP filtering with it. You can again, take note of any kind of banned nodes, banned filters. How are you going to build up the actual circuit? This is a really nice piece of software, so you maybe want to download this. Again, I'll give you the link for that, and also a white paper on how it's set up. So this is the Advanced Onion Router by a guy called Abu Christian. So let's go back to this. So the technology, as you can see, is really easy to get hold of. It's not difficult, and it's very, very easy to use. So Andy, does that mean if the NSA wanted to get me, I'm okay? No, of course not. They just drop a 0 day on your machine. If they detect that you've got if you're using this technology, they'll probably just drop a 0 day on you anyway, and they'll have access. So, as I said, if the security services want access to you, then I'm pretty sure that they're going to get it. So what is this thing called the dark web? Andy, you keep talking about the dark web. What do we mean by that? Well, the good ship Google and the good ship Microsoft set sail above and in sunny skies, and everything's hunky-dory, yes? We can find whatever we want. We go to Windows Azure. We get all our cloud-based applications. But under the sea, what we can see, of course, is on the right-hand side there. You know, one of the most searched for content on the internet is pornography. You know, like it or loathe it, it's a fact. It's the most searched for content on the internet is pornography. So what we can see here is at the top is, I don't know if you want to class it as good porn. I know some of you guys are going to be at the back going, this is great, man. I don't need to search for stuff now. I know exactly where the good stuff is. So we've got the good porn at the top here, and you can see at the bottom we've got the really nasty stuff. You know, so, you know, if you're into, I don't know, child pornography, God forbid, animals, whatever that means, I don't know. But, you know, if you're into kind of weird stuff, then, again, there's some pretty nasty, very, very disturbing content out there. The other thing as well is you can also see that we've got hackers. So, you know, you've probably seen this week a number of hacking sessions and hacking tools. Yeah, again, all the really good hacking tools are not available on the internet. So you've got to go deep in order to get those nice tools. But you can see a large area of the dark web is used for government and military use. And as I said, quite rightly too. Okay? So I'm based in the UK. And of course, GCHQ work very closely with your National Security Agency and MI6 and all of those as well. So when we talk about the dark web, we talk about this anonymous and unindexed area of the internet. So it's unindexed by default, by purpose. I don't want you finding web pages. And in fact, to be frank, a lot of the content is not HTML based anyway. Okay, so it's like going back 30 years ago, back to the days of the mainframe type stuff. But what we are seeing, as I've said, is a very large and growing danger with criminal activity. So we're seeing things like copyright infringement. Of course, you know, we're not talking about websites like the Pirate Bay where you can go and download movies. We're talking about downloading of child pornography. We're talking about downloading snuff movies. Nasty stuff, you know, that you don't want to see. Credit card fraud, identity theft. Again, and this is actually rumored to contain hundreds of times more content than on the regular internet, which is frightening, actually. So there are currently around 500,000 to 750,000 illegal websites containing this type of content. And as you can imagine, for law enforcement agencies, I talk to law enforcement agencies about this. I have a version of this presentation for them. And again, it's a real concern. It's a real concern that we have these issues out there. But you can see that it is growing. So I've mentioned relay nodes and exit nodes. They're combating these crimes by actually building more and more exit nodes, more and more relays, in the hope that they're going to catch the traffic. Okay? So when we talk about the dark web, we talk about controlled substances, drugs, illegal, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not talking just about marijuana. We're talking about heroin. We're talking about cocaine, the really, really nasty stuff. Armory, selling all kinds of weapons. So, this is kind of black market weapons. This is the kind of stuff that you're going to sell to African warlords that's going to kill a lot of people, going to kill a lot of children. Child pornography, unauthorized leaks of sensitive information. So there are websites on the internet, I'll show you a couple, where you can go and you can actually, whistleblow. Okay? You can sell secrets to your company. So, I'm in the UK, Zeneca, the drug manufacturer. Can you imagine if Pfizer developed a cure for cancer, the miracle cure? Can you imagine how much that secret would be worth? Yes? Can you imagine how much a sneaky preview of Windows 9 would be worth? Yes. Okay. So leaks of sensitive information is really important. Money laundering, copyright infringement, credit card fraud, all of these nasties are up there. So when we talk about how on earth do we classify all of this stuff on the web? So a lot of the stuff is dynamic, so it's randomly changing. But a lot of the stuff is actually unlinked. So a lot of the web pages will have unlinked content. So it's just a standalone page, a standalone entry portal, for example, into a military site. So it's not linked to anything else. You're going to have things like a private site. So a private site, whether it be pornography, whether it be drugs, whether it be Bitcoin, whatever it is, you're going to need to log in with a valid ID and password. Again, don't use your real names, for God's sake. Contextual. So you might then use alternate content. So this is, for example, where the website's got 30 pages, but each page has got a different IP address. It's geolocated in different areas of the world. They're quite complex sites. Then you've got limited access sites, sites that use things like CAPTCHAs and, different access methods. Scripted, so automated sites. So again, you might have a site that's got a little bit of scripting that performs an action and not necessarily a good thing. And, as I've mentioned, for government, military, law enforcement, you may just not have HTML sites. As I say, you might have a landing page, but it takes you to a back-end platform. Okay, so how do we actually find content then on the dark web? Can I Google it? Bing it, sorry. My program manager's down there going, don't say Google. Okay. So obviously search engines don't work. Search engines only find the nice stuff. So if you want to find the really cool stuff, you need to use a wiki, what we call a wiki. The only thing, and probably the most famous wiki here is the hidden wiki. So if you browse on Google, Bing, I keep saying that, sorry. If you browse in Bing and you search for the hidden wiki, you won't find it, okay? You'll maybe find a Wikipedia entry for it, but you won't find the hidden wiki. Again, you need a client like Tor to help you find this kind of content. Interestingly, by the way, how do law enforcement agencies use this technology? Well, there's a tool called Big Planet, and this is a deep web intelligence tool. And it uses big data. You know this concept of big data. And this is what, obviously, the NSA do. They basically just harvest everything, and they essentially filter everything. So this is using that kind of technology. So again, it's not just for law enforcement agencies. Anybody can use it as well. It's a legitimate platform too. So exploring the dark web, let me just open up this page again. Okay, so that's the TOR network. As I've mentioned, you can download everything here. I can use this browser. This is an anonymous browser as well, and you can tells you a little bit about how that works. So this is an interesting article out there. So working with deep links, there are a number of reports. There's been a number of academic studies done on this, some of which, by the way, I will make available to you. So again, they give you millions, thousands and thousands of links here. So, you know, I'm just talking about the hidden wiki. It's not just the hidden wiki. There are other wikis there as well. But there are an awful lot of other indexing and other search engines as well. So, again, I'll provide you with that link. So just close that down. Let me just close this down. And yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my Tor browser. Oops, am I still running? Sorry. Start a fresh one. Okay, so first things first, you know that you're working with the latest version of the Onion router because it will tell you. So this is the very latest. And it's important, don't work with older versions. These are constantly updated, so don't work with older versions because you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're secure. So what we have here, as you can see, I can go ahead, I can generate a new identity at any time. So there you go. I've just gone ahead and instantly created a new identity. I've now got a new route through the Onion Router network. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the hidden wiki. And you can see, if you look at the address here down at the bottom, it's a lot of gobbledygook. And you can see that the address here is just, this randomly changes. So often you've got to do a search for the hidden wiki because it will actually change quite often. So what we can see then is basically this is the Bing, the search engine, the way in, or one of the ways into the dark web. So again, talks about the Onion Router project, introduction points, so if you're new to this, which many of you may be. Then we talk about financial services. Okay, just a word of warning, this is not your local bank that I'm talking about here. These bankers have Kalashnikovs, okay? And they will come knocking on your door if you don't pay. So obviously, one of the things that we're talking about here is stolen funds, obviously credit card fraud, and a lot of this is, you can see, fake stuff here. Yeah, so there's, you know, a lot of kind of cloned cards here with PayPal transfers. So there's some kind of nasty stuff. And again, these links constantly change, by the way. Then we have commercial services here. Let's see if we can find some Sky HD TV cards for free. There you go. Euro guns. So I may want to go and buy a gun. Obviously, in many parts of Europe, don't allow guns. So I'll just click on that link. okay? And you can see some of the links have been torn down. Let me open up one that I know was working an hour ago. So this was one that I found. Let's see if it works. So you can see it is a little bit slower than your regular internet. It's because of all the relays that it's doing. Come on. It's obviously being routed through Canada. Okay. I'm joking. Okay, let's see what else we can see. So the other thing I was going to mention, by the way, is hosting. So again, one of the things, it's very, very easy to host an Onion website as well. I'm just waiting for this to come up. Looks like it's taking a while. So again, there are a number of kind of secure servers that you can set up. Again, if you're prepared to put content in some of these sites, you know, you don't know where these are hosted. You don't know who's hosting these. But there you go. You can buy buy yourself a nice little Kalashnikov and keep you warm at night. Okay. As I'm sure many of you do. Okay, so what we also have is we have a number of blogs. You know, that's, what can you say about young teens on cam? You know, it's pretty nasty, disturbing content here. I'm not obviously going to click on any of this stuff here. I'll never work for Microsoft again. Then you have some whistleblowing websites here. And what we've seen actually over the last kind of 12 months is an awful lot of new websites, actually, so which are taking the place of WikiLeaks. Audio, music, TV, drugs, okay. Some of you in the audience, your eyeballs have just lit up when I've showed you that. And going, whoa, this is great. Okay. No more trips to New Orleans. Okay. Okay, animal related. Hey, whatever you're bagging, whatever you're into, that's fine. But anyway, you can see here that that's pretty much a gateway into absolutely everything. Now, if you don't want to use a wiki, then of course there are search engines that you can use as well. So this is an example of one of those search engines. This is Tor Search, and there's also Torch. And you can see at the moment this is searching around almost 500,000 pages. This is just on this one particular search engine alone. So again, I'll provide you with a whole list of links here, but please be very careful what you click on. If there's a little black van suddenly appear outside your house, take that as a note you need to shut down and I don't know, move to France or something. Okay. Okay, so there we go. Right, so moving on. Okay, how are we doing? We're okay. Good. Okay, so a little bit of the dark web. As I mentioned, if you want to get things like anonymous email, this is one of many, many services. I'm not endorsing any of these services or products. I'm just saying this is what's available. This is open source. So this is an example of an anonymous email platform. Probably one of the most famous dark web websites. It's back up again, Silk Road number 5, Silk Road number 6. Hey, this is great. I don't need to go down the road anymore. I can just go here. If you need something a little more than Viagra, then this is the place to go. Okay. Again, there are some very, very disturbing websites, and I would urge you be very, very careful. A lot of these are honeypots, obviously to catch the bad guys, because we want to catch the bad guys. I work a lot with the law enforcement agencies, and I think it's really important to have honeypots in this area. Again, examples of the black market website. This is actually the website that I was trying to get to. It was down. So you can see here, you can buy anything that you want here. Okay. Of course, intelligence is very, very important. Information is worth its weight in gold. So whether you're selling military secrets, whether you're selling corporate secrets, again, this is potentially the place to go and make a lot of money out of that. So we spoke about what it is. We spoke about how it works. We spoke about the type of content that you can get. What about potential flaws in the onion? Okay, so this all sounds great, Andy, but there's got to be a flaw in it. Well, as I've said, at the moment, the TOR network has never been broken as of today. Okay, the actual network itself has never been broken. So, but there are flaws around the network, but you can help yourself by making yourselves more secure. So we're going to talk about that here. So what are we talking about, the flaws? Well, as you've seen, the problem is it does a lot of multi-hopping. Okay? So again, that tends to slow connections down. Now, what happens when you get a slower connection is it potentially is vulnerable to you doing a network scan. Potentially vulnerable. Confusion, there's a lot of confusion out there whether something is unlinkable, whether it's anonymous. So there's a big difference to being anonymous and just having something unlinked. Okay? That's the key thing you need to know. So while using Tor, leaks strike out the word can. Leaks do occur through third-party apps and through third-party add-ons. Yes? So this is one of the real weak areas. So if I was doing a forensic investigation and I suspected that you were downloading or you were doing something illicit on the TOR network, it's not the TOR network that I would try and attack. It's this kind of weak area around the TOR network. Of course, the darknet is heavily monitored by law enforcement, and they're constantly battering on the door to try and get in. So they are building hundreds, or they're installing hundreds of relays and exit nodes in GCHQ and the NSA data centers and so on to try and break the network down. As I've said, many sites actually contain honeypots as well. So you might, I don't know if whatever you're into, I don't know. But, if you go to that site, everything may not be as it seems. So just be warned about that. So there are essentially what we have 6 different types of attacks that we can talk about. So one is the timing attack, as I've mentioned, to kind of capture the traffic between the relay. Entry monitoring. So if you suspect somebody is using Tor, the easiest way for me would just be to drop a little 0 day on that machine. And believe me, it's easy to do. And essentially, you just monitor what's going out. So obviously, you're not going to monitor the actual communication, but who's the guy talking to? What kind of content is he sending? You would have a pretty good idea of what type of bad guy it would be. An intersection attack. So if a relay node was vulnerable, so if a node was broken or if it was infected with a piece of malware, let's say, we could perform what we call an intersection attack. Denial of service attack, I've mentioned that one. Predecessor attack. This is sometimes referred to as a relay or a replay attack. And again, the opposite of the entry node, the exit node sniffing. So if you know the person is using Tor, if you know that they're downloading content, again, that can be very, very useful there too. Okay, a timing analysis then. So obviously a timing analysis is to determine whether the bad guy is actually transmitting. So am I actually using Tor? So if I'm using TOR, how often am I using it? So you could actually monitor the time period between one transmission and another. So that's a potential vulnerability. Now, you can, TOR does actually work around that with one of its commands. It can send kind of dummy messages. So it makes them think that they're transmitting, but is not transmitting anything. A little bit like the old IPX, SPX protocol. Remember that? It kept kind of wakening up every few, am I still here? Am I still here? Yeah? So that was a little bit like that. Entry node sniffing here, so we've got the police officer here. He knows you're a bad guy. He knows you're using TOR. Again, all he does is he drops a 0-day on your box, and essentially he's monitoring what you're sending out. So who are you talking to? What are you sending? What are you doing? And again, he's not necessarily looking at the communications, but he's looking around what you're sending. So that's a very, very useful form of attack, and it's probably one of the most common types of attacks out there. Again, the exit node sniffing as well. So again, in this case, if the red line there is encrypted with SSL, obviously that makes it a little harder, but in many cases that is actually open, and again we can find out what Bob is actually looking at here. Intersection attack, this is where we drop a piece of malware on a potentially vulnerable machine, and again we monitor that machine. So, that is, again, a really, really useful type of attack. Predecessor, so as we move from node to node, it might not, as I say, you will never know the original location, but what you will know is you will maybe find out information about the previous node. And again, that can be very useful in cracking or breaking the chain. And again, this is a well-known tactic of law enforcement. Mentioned that one already, the DDoS attack. So again, the way it changes that basically will limit the actual rates of transmission. Again, and that's quite useful. So if you're trying to send thousands of packets, it will just say, no, I'm not going to do that. It will force you to limit the transmission, and therefore it won't bring the link down. So as a law enforcement person, as a law enforcement organization, again, the fight against the dark web, I'm not saying that all users of this type of technology are bad guys, but there are bad guys out there, and we need tools and technologies to help find them. Some of the, forensically speaking though, unless you've dropped a 0-day on my machine, if you just managed to get my machine today, and you thought, hey, let's have a look forensically speaking. By the way, it's exactly the same with Windows 8. The settings are exactly the same. So, for example, if you look at the Windows prefetcher file, it will just keep records of the TOR bundle application. So you saw the TOR bundle application on my machine. Again, if I look at the Windows thumbnail, so if you're thinking, oh, I'll get a look at what pictures he's downloading, is he downloading any illicit pictures, it doesn't store that. So the only analysis that we found in doing a forensic analysis of TOR was the fact that it had the icons. Likewise, the paging file. So if you look at the hyperfill.sys file, again, there is no content. It just gives details of the actual TOR installation. It does not record, it does not store any content. And finally, we can see this one here, the registry. The only thing that's in the registry is the fact that it's using the web browser, it's the TOR package, so there's no content actually stored. So this is why it's such a good technology. Now, if you were to do a network analysis of this, just using a general kind of tool like T-Shark here, for example, or Wireshark, you can see it would just say, oh, hell, this is just port 443. It's just using SSL traffic. But if you use a technology like, for example, CapLoader, which is one of my favorite tools, you can see it actually identifies it as a TOR traffic. Okay, and this can be very useful in identifying the net. You know, if you were in a school or something and you were trying to identify, you know, other kids using this technology in the school. So it's quite useful to be able to see that traffic. And you can see, although it's using port 443, you can actually see its true origins here. So, Andy, is it possible to block TOR traffic? Actually, the TOR project actually give you the tools to do this. So you can actually go in here and you can actually see or obtain a list of exit addresses from the TOR network. You can then paste these into a notepad, and you can then, of course, add these to your firewall rules, either manually, or you can obviously create some kind of script so that it automatically updates that. As I've done a lot of research on this, and that seems to be the only two ways. Because and again, on here, there's a link on this slide to a piece of research from a school here in the United States. And this is basically the method that he used, and it's actually very, very good. So I think you'll find that quite useful. So is it possible to block this? Yes and no. It's difficult, and the best way to do it is probably through some kind of scripting. Now, Andy, am I totally unique on the internet? This is really interesting. This is web browser fingerprinting. So again, relatively new. It's researched by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And what they found is that we're all absolutely unique, pretty much. So 94% of all the research was done. Every person who ran this test was unique. So again, what we're now looking at is we're now looking at law enforcement agencies where just through your browser, we can tell what, you know, that there actually is you. Okay? So again, even in privacy mode, it gives this away. It gives things like the browser version, the language, the fonts that you're using, the IP, not necessarily the IP addresses, but the time zones. So where are you? And also it lists what add-ons you've got in there. So you can see here supported items, geographical information. That can be very, very useful in the fight against crime. So you can see that it gives it in a SHA-256 algorithm. You can see here that I just did that today. Panoptic. If you go to this website, you can, in fact, I'll show you right quickly. So if I just go into the web, just go up here, and you can, oops, just go in here. So Panoptic, again, I'll give you all the links. Click on Test Me. Okay, so you can see this is unique. 1 in 4,122,255. Okay, and it gives you a complete report here of all your unique features. So that will work exactly the same in privacy. So that is the same as I've just showed you. This is in privacy mode. So in privacy, you're not that private, really. Okay, even in TOR, an older version of TOR is pretty much the same as privacy mode. Whereas if you use an up-to-date TOR, look at that, only 647,000. So again, you're much less unique. You're leaking much less data there. Okay. Just finishing off very, very quickly. So staying anonymous, again, proxies. I've got way too many slides here, sorry. So basically 3 types of proxy: an anonymous proxy, distorting, and a high, basically being highly anonymous. That's probably the one to go for because it doesn't identify itself and it gives bogus IP addresses. Okay. Again, I won't bother with a demo. Some other useful websites for you. Fingerprints, this is great because it gives like an absolute unique fingerprint of a genuine site. So if somebody's trying to route you to a bad site, this can be quite useful there. That's the alternate to WikiLeaks. Again, I've just put some good websites. This is great. This is anonymous texting. So if you want to be absolutely sure that nobody's looking at your text, this is great safe plug. So if you want to be a TOR network, just plug that into your router. And this is one of my favorites. This is Code Talker Tunnel. It used to be known as Skype Morph. So it's basically a device, and if anybody's trying to browse your network, they just see Skype traffic. So it's Tor traffic, but it's basically hidden as Skype traffic. So top tips then. Don't use browser widgets. Don't torrent over Tor because they'll get you. Use the most up-to-date. Always use HTTPS. Nice to see that the vendors have got that. Never download documents through Tor because, again, they can find you. Sorry about the rush there. But I'll make sure that you've got all of this content, and I'll put loads of extras in. So what did we talk about today then? We talked about the TOR, the onion router. We talked about how it works, talked about how it's set up. We've talked about why you use it, some of the reasons that we use it. So we've talked about the dangers and the dark web, though the dark web isn't necessarily all bad. Forensics and law enforcement, and again, technology and business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all my links, movies, everything that I've shown you today, I'm going to stick it up there. Again, for more information, there's plenty of resources there on security. Key thing is for you today is I would really, really appreciate some feedback from me. I know it was a little bit different to your average Tech Ed session, but I really hope that you found it interesting. And you stayed, so you must have liked it. So. But I really appreciate it. And I'm Andy Malone. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I can't hear you. Good morning. How are we enjoying Tech Ed? Yeah? Okay, okay. What an attractive-looking bunch of people. Yes. Okay. Well, a very good morning to you. Welcome to my session, The Dark Web Rises, a journey through the looking glass. My name is Andy Malone. I'm from Scotland, or as some of you might know it, as north of the wall. So I'm an MVP in enterprise security, very much like Marcus Murray and Hussein and Paula. I deal with more, well, a different side of security than they do. Based in the UK, but I pretty much travel everywhere. I'm also the founder of the Cybercrime Security Forum, of which, if you're in the Netherlands, we have an event next week, and the week after we have one in Cyprus. Go to the banner at the bottom of the slide for more details on that. Both myself and Paula are going to be there for that. So, this particular session is all about the dark side of the internet. So how on earth do we see the dark side of the internet? Well, really, we're going to focus on kind of technologies that are supposed to keep you anonymous online. So it's probably absolutely nothing to do with Tech Ed, nothing to do with Windows. This is a little diversion. This is security, and I think it's a really interesting topic, and I think it's very, very relevant at the moment in light of the Snowden disclosures. Now, last year, if you would have been at one of my sessions last year, I kind of dedicated about 5 minutes onto this. And a lot of people came back to me and said, hey, that was so from, really nasty adult websites, child pornography, human trafficking, slavery, gambling, illicit drugs, ammo and weapons and so on. We've seen this freely available on the internet, on this particular side of the internet. So it's really important that if you decide to go down the dark side, a Sith you will become. Yes. So, it's much better to be a Jedi. Okay. So, basically finding a voice for the oppressed. So we've seen this throughout the world recently. I was in Ukraine recently. I was in Kiev, a beautiful city. And they're having one or two problems over there at the moment, as you probably appreciate. Likewise, folks in Afghanistan, folks in Iraq, so countries where the internet is oppressed. So a number of Middle Eastern countries, for example, a number of Asian countries kind of curtail what you can and what you can't look at. So we feel that this particular website is not suitable for you. Yes. So, of course, it's all about freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom to look at stuff. So, again, it's very important, this piece of technology out there. Another thing as well is also if you're a reporter in one of these countries. So, for example, in Iran, let's say, you can't have the BBC are not allowed to go into Iran to actually report the news. So, again, this is a great way to actually get the news out of a country. So, again, finding a voice for the oppressed. So, why use the onion? What is this onion anyway? So, basically, freedom from potential oppression, from having communications monitored. So, here in the US and other parts of the world, certainly since the Snowden revelations, of course, it's not a case of they're capturing my data as it gets to you. They're actually capturing my data at the source. So they're actually tapping the actual cables of the data. So, and how do you on earth defend against things like that? Well, you can make it harder for people. You can use encryption technologies. So it's actually quite interesting that, you know, we talk about AES and TLS encryption, all these different types of encryptions, and they're all NSA compliant. Okay, okay, so they've got the keys. Is that basically what you're trying to tell me, Andy? Pretty much, probably. So it's always a good idea to go with kind of open source technologies in that kind of respect. Also, as you can see, it's useful in the UK, for example, certain Swedish websites are blocked, for example. So if you want to access content illegally, then obviously that. But also other things as well. So, for example, I'm in the UK. We have the BBC iPlayer. You know, I'm traveling. I'm abroad here. I want to watch the iPlayer. I want to watch on-demand TV. So again, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can either use something like a TOR, and you can also use you know, some kind of proxy. So there are kind of genuine reasons to kind of use this technology. So not necessarily. So is there a way to block this technology? We'll also talk about that. We're also going to talk about potential forensics and law enforcement implications of using this technology as well. So that's pretty much the areas that we're going to talk about. Also, TOR technology or anonymous technology and your business as well. So we're going to talk about the concept of proxies. Now, this technology has been out for a few years. It's evolved over a number of years as well, because obviously threats evolve. So, again, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. So, first of all, what is TOR and why do we have it? Really, to talk about TOR, we need to look at it from kind of two perspectives. So, on one side, the whole point of this open source software, and that's important to say that, it is completely open source, it's run by a voluntary organization, it's not absolutely non-profit, it makes no money whatsoever. That's the first thing. So the idea is to give the oppressed a voice. So there are places in the world, recently you probably read about Turkey disabling certain areas of the internet, certain websites. In the UK, for example, obviously the movie industry, the music industry, they don't want us going online downloading movies and music. Not that I ever do that, you understand. So obviously, in the good side, it will give the oppressed a potential voice, which is great. However, on the other side, what we've seen over the last few years is obviously a huge rise in criminal activity. That was interesting, so I've kind of fleshed the whole thing out here. So we're going to talk about what is TOR and what does it mean to be anonymous, and can you truly be anonymous on the internet? Truly, the answer is no. There is no such thing as really being anonymous on the internet. If anybody, if they want you, they will get you some way and somehow. That's the key thing to know. But there are things that you can do to kind of make yourself a little bit more anonymous, should we say. So we're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about who uses TOR and why. So is it just bad guys? Of course not. Okay, and there are a number of legitimate reasons to use this particular technology. So we're going to talk about the technology itself, who uses it, why, and hopefully by the end of the session, I'm going to kind of give a rounded, so I'm not necessarily for this technology, I'm not necessarily against this technology. I just want you to make your own mind up about it. So we're going to talk about, understand what the dark web actually is. Essentially, it's anything that Bing or Google don't classify, basically. So if your page is not in Google or Bing, you're on the dark web, pretty much. We'll also talk about learning about potential flaws in the technology. And are there flaws in the technology? And if so, how do we exploit them? How do law enforcement agencies exploit them? You as a business, for example, you might work for a school, a college, a business. You may not want your users actually using TOR on your network.